Boris Johnson's appearance before Parliament's Privileges Committee has been widely panned. And by most accounts, I was too stupid to realise I was breaking the rules I wrote. It's not an especially impressive defence for a former Prime Minister. But not everyone agrees. This is today's Daily Mail front page. It's based on a story by Sarah Vine, obviously Michael Gove's ex-wife. Harman's face was thunder. Boris was as agile as a cat. Pure box office. But after 4 nitpicking hours, had a single mind been changed? Boris was agile like a cat. It was completely bizarre. I mean, she would have been in lots of dinner parties with Boris Johnson, and we still think it's sort of acceptable for her to be writing front pages on serious national newspapers. But there we are. Talking of serious things, this is Nadine Dorries. This was her assessment. Boris Johnson, very clear today, not sure there is a reasonable person in the land who would think that the committee could do anything other than totally exonerate him, and not before time either. I'm so glad she's got a Twitter account, because otherwise I really would have missed her. She followed that up with a pretty mystifying comparison. It was the 20-year anniversary of the Iraq invasion this week. Did Tony Blair at any time face the scrutiny that Boris Johnson has repeatedly been subjected to, both at the dispatch box and before committees? No, of course not. He was a Labour PM and a Remainer. I don't think it had anything to do with him being a Remainer. That wasn't an issue there. I agree with her that illegally invading Iraq was a lot more serious than having a party during lockdown, right? I don't necessarily take Nadine Dorries at her word, though, considering this is the only thing she has said about Iraq this week. So obviously, important anniversary, 20 years. She is only raising this because she thinks it is a sort of bizarre reach defence she can make of her ally, Boris Johnson. We have a clip for you now. This is on his GB News show. It's Jacob Rees-Mogg.
This position of Boris, his success in leading Brexit, that has ultimately led to him being in front of the Privileges Committee today. This was never really about cake or curtains or indeed about Chris Pincher. It was fundamentally about Brexit and the reaction of the establishment to Boris as the figure of Brexit. If I am the Woolworths of Nigel Farage, Boris is the Fortnum Mason of Brexiteers. And his opponents seem to suffer from Boris spongiform encephalopathy, a newly discovered wasting disease of the brain, which particularly affects metropolitan types, and now known to be prevalent in Islington.
These are the same politicians who vote to slash benefits for some of the poorest people in the country and then worry about their pay not going up enough and are prepared to stand on TV cameras and worry about that. These are the same politicians who have very little issue with a massive expansion of police powers during lockdown, which, to be honest, concerned me, where the police were able to patrol and harass those communities that they enjoy patrolling and harassing and were given free rein to do so. Politicians didn't much care. But when one of their mates was holding big parties, they all appeared en masse, his friends, to defend him. So it's a simple case of class loyalty. Some people matter, other people don't. You repress and harass the people who don't matter, and you support the people who do. But the interesting thing here from Nadine Dorries and from Jacob Rees-Mogg is the attempt by the right to claim itself as a kind of anti-elitism, a kind of anti-establishment mantle, where the establishment becomes Islington, a word that combines some of the richest parts of London and some of the poorest, by the way, multiracial, of course, and that's part of why it's loathed. And the establishment becomes anyone who supported remaining in the European Union, so that Tony Blair can be tagged along with nurses who were exhausted during COVID and followed all the rules while they were completely exhausted and dilapidated, and now are furious at Boris Johnson. And so they too become part of the establishment of the metropolitan elite if they happen to live in cities, or greedy public sector workers if they don't, who need to be have their pay cut. So this redefinition of who's in the establishment and who's in the elite allows people like Jacob Rees-Mogg to position himself as a crusader for the dispossessed, while supporting Boris Johnson as a man, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was filmed as a child talking about his aspirations to make enormous amounts of money, presumably off the backs of other people, make that money by trading off other people's labour, and who's lived his whole life trading off other people's labour, benefiting from an amassed family fortune and a nanny who travels around with him everywhere he goes. The representative of a British ruling class which has wrought havoc in Britain and all over the world, gets to position himself as a champion of the underdog in a politics which is designed to get to trick poor and oppressed people into supporting someone like Boris Johnson as a kind of heroic truth teller. This is the stuff that Nigel Farage, of course, has thrived on for years, while in fact the goal of this politics is to further entrench privilege and power everywhere that they find it.